Imagine standing in a ballroom, feet throbbing, just one broken heel away from financial ruin. You hand your heavy bag to the scary security guard by the door, thinking he's just a guy named Dan. But what if Dan isn't a guard at all? What if he is the ruthless alpha king of the East Coast? And when he grabbed your waist to steady you, he wasn't being polite, he was claiming his mate. You think you hired a handyman, he thinks he found his queen. Get ready for a story full of misunderstandings, high-heat romance, and a raccoon named Beef. Before we dive in, please like this video and subscribe to @Sarah Werewolf Romance Collection for your daily escape. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you listening from today? Let's begin. Chapter 1. The heels were a mistake. A calculated $40 mistake, but a mistake nonetheless. Olivia Liv Miller shifted her weight from one throbbing foot to the other, balancing a silver tray loaded with half-empty champagne flutes. The ballroom of the Drake Hotel was swimming in expensive perfume and the low, droning hum of rich people discussing things Liv couldn't afford, like diversified portfolios and summering in the Alps. Table 4 needs water, her manager, distinct only by the vein popping in his forehead, hissed into her ear. And fix your blazer. You look like you slept in a dryer. On it, Liv muttered, though she was pretty sure Table 4 needed an exorcism more than hydration. She navigated the sea of silk gowns and tuxedos, dodging a waiter who looked about 2 seconds away from a nervous breakdown. This wasn't just any party. This was the Apex Summit. Liv didn't know what Apex meant in a corporate context, but judging by the size of the men in the room, it probably meant we eat gym equipment for breakfast. Every guy here was massive, not just gym bro big, but industrial big. They moved with a weird, synchronized, predatory grace that made the hair on Liv's arms stand up. But honestly, she was too tired to care. She had rent due in 3 days, and her bank account currently contained $12 and a coupon for a free taco. She needed 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes to peel these torture devices off her feet and breathe air that didn't smell like money and desperation. She spotted the side exit. It was guarded by a mountain. The man standing by the door was ridiculous. He had to be at least 6'5", broadcast enough to block out the sun, and wearing a black suit that cost more than Liv's entire life education. He stood with his hands clasped in front of him, staring at the crowd with a look of utter, bored disdain. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, giving him a permanent, "don't talk to me" expression. Perfect. Security. Liv hobbled over, the tray of glasses rattling dangerously. The man didn't move. He didn't even blink. He was like a statue carved out of bad attitude. "Hey, big guy," Liv whispered, sliding up next to him. He stiffened. His head turned slowly, looking down at her like she was a bug he wasn't sure if he should squash or study. His eyes were dark, almost black, and intense enough to start a fire. "Excuse me?" His voice was a low rumble, like a subway train passing underground. "I need a favor," Liv said, breathless. She unhooked her heavy, glittery purse from her shoulder, the one currently holding her flats, a stolen bag of shrimp, and her phone, and shoved it against his solid, rock-hard chest. "Hold this. If my manager, the guy with the vein issue, asks where I went, tell him I'm handling a hygiene emergency. Don't let anyone steal my tips." The man looked at the bag pressed against his sternum. Then he looked at her. The silence stretched, heavy and thick. The air around him felt weirdly charged, like the moment right before a lightning strike. "You want me," he said, saying each word carefully, "to hold your bag?" "Please," Liv begged. She tried to thrust the heavy bag at him, but her broken heel finally gave way. She pitched forward. She expected him to catch the bag. He didn't. Instead, his massive hands shot out and clamped onto her waist. It wasn't a polite, steadying grip. It was possessive. His thumbs dug into her hips, his fingers splaying wide over the silk of her blouse, pulling her flush against his rock-hard body. The heat radiating off him was intense, burning through her clothes. For a second, Liv forgot how to breathe. He wasn't looking at the bag. He was looking down at her, his dark eyes dilated, his nostrils flaring as if he were inhaling her. "Careful," he rumbled. The sound vibrated against her chest. Liv squeaked, her heart hammering. She awkwardly wedged the glittery purse between their chests to create some space. "Thanks, but the bag? I need you to hold the bag, big guy, not me." He blinked, as if waking up from a trance. He slowly released her waist, his hands lingering for a fraction of a second too long before reluctantly taking the purse. "Right," he grated out. "The bag." "I'll cut you in on the shrimp," she said, breathless, backing away. She turned and bolted for the ladies' room, leaving the Alpha King of the East Coast standing there, gripping a glittery purse like it was the only lifeline keeping him from chasing her. Chapter 2. Dominic Rossi did not hold purses. He held territories. He held the lives of 300 wolves in his hands. He held the throats of his enemies. He did not hold cheap sequined bags for catering staff, and yet, here he was. His beta, Marcus, walked up to him, a glass of whiskey in hand. Marcus froze. He looked at Dominic, then at the glittery bag clutched in Dominic's massive hand. "Dom," Marcus said, his voice trembling slightly. "Why are you holding that?" "I don't know," Dominic rumbled. It was a lie. He knew exactly why. The moment the tiny, chaotic human had come within 3 feet of him, his inner wolf, Rage, had woken up from a 6-month slumber and slammed against his ribcage, howling, "Mine!" She smelled like burnt sugar and something soft, like vanilla. It was the most intoxicating thing he had ever smelled, cutting through the stench of fear and aggression that filled the room. Every human in this ballroom was terrified of him. The static, the subtle infrasound alphas emitted, made them nauseous and flighty. But her? She'd shoved a bag into his chest and offered him shrimp. She had zero survival instincts. It was infuriating. It was adorable. "Is that a tip jar?" Marcus asked, pointing to the side pocket of the purse. "Walk away, Marcus," Dominic growled, "or I'll feed you your tie." Marcus wisely vanished. A few minutes later, the girl returned. She looked slightly less pained, though she was still limping. She'd reapplied lipstick that was a shade too bright for her pale skin. She skidded to a stop next to him, her eyes wide. "Oh, thank God," she exhaled, grabbing the bag. "I thought you might have bailed. You look like the type who bails." Dominic stared at her. "I do not bail." Sure. Keep telling yourself that, tough guy." She dug into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled napkin. Inside was a mini quiche, slightly squashed. "I promised. Payment for services rendered." She held up the quiche. Dominic looked at the sad, lukewarm pastry. He was the king. He ate meals prepared by Michelin star chefs. He could buy this hotel. He took the quiche. He ate it in one bite. It tasted like cardboard and heaven. "You're weird," Liv decided, watching him eat. She fished a $5 bill out of her apron pocket and slapped it into his hand. "Buy yourself a coffee. You look like you need to smile, Dan." "Dan?" he repeated. "You look like a Dan. Or a Barry, but definitely security. You've got that I hate everyone vibe down pat." She patted his arm, actually patted the bicep of the most dangerous predator in Chicago, and winked. "Thanks, Dan. Try not to beat anyone up tonight." She hustled away back into the crowd. Dominic looked down at the crumpled $5 bill in his palm. He smoothed it out with his thumb. "Dan," he whispered, testing the name. His wolf purred, curling up in his chest, satisfied. The king was dead for the night. Long live Dan. Chapter 3. It started raining 20 minutes after Liv got fired. It wasn't a drizzle. It was a Chicago deluge, cold enough to freeze bone marrow. Liv stood on the curb outside the hotel, shivering in her thin blazer, holding a box containing her comfortable shoes and the rest of the stolen shrimp. "Unprofessional conduct," the manager had sneered. Apparently, fraternizing with security was a fireable offense. "Great," she muttered to herself, water dripping off her nose. "Just great. Now I have to sell a kidney. Or feet pics. Do people buy pics of feet with blisters?" A black SUV, sleek and looking more like a tank than a car, rolled up to the curb. The window rolled down. It was Dan, the security giant. He looked even bigger sitting in the driver's seat. The interior of the car glowed with soft dashboard lights. It smelled like expensive leather and heat. "Get in," he said. It wasn't a question. "I can't afford a ride, Dan," Liv shouted over the rain. "Unless you accept payment in expired coupons." "Get in." His voice cut through the sound of the rain, deep and authoritative. Liv hesitated. Her mother had taught her never to get into cars with strange men. But her mother had never stood in 33-degree rain with a broken heel. Plus, Dan had held her bag. That practically made them family. She opened the door and scrambled in, dragging her wet misery onto the pristine leather seats. "Oh my God," she groaned as the heat hit her face. "This is nicer than my apartment. Do they pay security guards this much? Are you in the mafia? Blink twice if you're in the mafia." Dominic didn't blink. He put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb smoothly. "Where do you live?" "South Side, near the old cannery. The building that looks like it's being held together by duct tape and prayers." Dominic's knuckles turned white on the steering wheel. "That area is not safe." "Well, unless you're offering me a room in your palace, Dan, that's where I'm going." He didn't reply. He just drove. The silence in the car wasn't awkward exactly. It was heavy. Liv leaned her head back against the seat. The warmth was seeping into her bones. The rhythmic thrum of the engine was hypnotic. "You know," she mumbled, her eyes closing, "you're a nice guy, Dan. Scary, but nice. Don't tell anyone. Ruin your rep." She was out before they hit the second traffic light. Dominic watched her sleep in the rearview mirror. Her mouth was slightly open, and she was drooling on his upholstery. Rage, his wolf, was pacing in his mind, demanding he drive her to the penthouse, wrap her in blankets, and never let her leave. "Not yet," Dominic whispered to the beast. "We can't scare her yet." He drove to the crumbling building she called home. He didn't wake her up. He parked the car, turned off the engine, and sat there in the dark, watching the shadows of the alley, daring anything to move. He sat there for an hour, just guarding her sleep. Chapter 4. Liv woke up in her own bed. She sat up, gasping, her heart hammering against her ribs. She looked around. She was in her familiar, drafty bedroom with the peeling wallpaper. She was still wearing her catering clothes, though her shoes had been neatly placed by the door. "How did I—" She trailed off. She remembered the car, Dan, falling asleep. "Oh no," she groaned, burying her face in her hands. "I made the nice security giant carry me up 4 flights of stairs. I drooled in his car. I have to move to Wisconsin." A loud crash from the kitchen snapped her out of her shame spiral. "Beef!" she yelled. "If you are eating the drywall again, I swear to God!" She scrambled out of bed and ran into the kitchen. Beef, her rescue raccoon, was sitting on the counter. He was an absolute unit of a trash panda, round as a beach ball and twice as mean. Currently, he was washing something in her cat's water bowl. "What do you have?" Liv asked, approaching slowly. Beef hissed at her, clutching his prize. It was a ring. Liv snatched it before he could bite her. She held it up to the light. It was heavy. Platinum, maybe? It had a crest on it, a stylized wolf head biting a moon. It looked ancient and incredibly serious. "Where did you get this?" Liv asked the raccoon. Beef chattered and reached for it with his little human-like hands. "No, this isn't yours." Liv's stomach dropped. It must have fallen out of Dan's pocket when he carried her in. "Oh God, this looks expensive. He's going to think I stole it. He's going to think I'm a thief. I'm going to prison. Do they have raccoons in prison?" Knock, knock, knock. The sound was polite but firm. Liv froze. She looked at the door. She looked at the ring. She shoved the ring into a ceramic jar labeled Cookie Fund, which was empty, and grabbed the canister from her purse. She crept to the door. "Who is it?" "Ms. Miller?" A deep voice. Not Dan. "We're looking for a piece of property lost last night." Panic flared. They were here for the ring. Liv opened the door a crack. 2 men in suits stood there. They weren't as big as Dan, but they looked meaner. Professional. I don't have any money, Liv blurted out. We aren't here for money, the first man said, stepping forward. He tried to push the door open. Nope, Liv yelled. She raised the canister and sprayed him directly in the face. The man sputtered, coughing. Is that mint? It's breath freshener, Liv screamed, slamming the door and locking the deadbolt. Go away! My breath is fresh enough. Chapter 5. Open the door, Olivia. Liv froze. That voice. It was deep, rumbly, and vibrated right through the cheap wood of her door. Dan? She squeaked. Open the door, he repeated, before I take it off the hinges. She believed him. With trembling fingers, she unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. Dan filled the hallway. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket, just a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms that looked like they were carved from mahogany. He looked at the two men in the hallway, the one smelling like mint and his partner. Dan didn't say a word. He just tilted his head toward the stairs. The two men, who Liv assumed were debt collectors or angry ex-boyfriends, looked at Dan with pure, unadulterated terror. They bowed their heads. Actually bowed. And then they ran down the stairs like the devil was chasing them. Dan turned back to Liv. His gaze swept over her, checking for injuries. Are you okay? He asked. I sprayed him with wintergreen blast, Liv whispered. It was all I had. A corner of Dan's mouth twitched. It might have been a smile or a muscle spasm. He stepped into the apartment without asking. Hey! Liv protested, chasing him. You can't just walk in here, it's a mess. Dan ignored her. He scanned the room, his eyes moving with military precision. He spotted the leaking faucet in the kitchen. He spotted the drafty window. Finally, his eyes landed on the counter. Beef was sitting there, hissing. The raccoon puffed up, trying to look intimidating. He bared his teeth at the giant intruder. Dominic stared at the raccoon. He let out a low, soft sound from his chest. It wasn't a word. It was a vibration, a growl so deep it was barely audible. Beef's ears went back. The raccoon slowly lowered himself, sat down, and covered his eyes with his paws. Submission. Liv's jaw dropped. How did you do that? Beef hates men. He bit my landlord last week. He knows who's in charge, Dan said simply. He turned to the sink. Your washer is leaking. Everything is leaking, Dan. It's a feature. Dan grabbed the metal pipe under the sink. I can fix it. Wait, you need a wrench. Crunch. Dan twisted the metal pipe with his bare hand. The metal sheared off like it was made of wet paper. Water sprayed everywhere, hitting Dan in the chest, soaking his white shirt so it clung to his abs like a second skin. Liv stared. Did you just rip a steel pipe in half? Dan looked at the broken pipe in his hand, then at Liv. He blinked. It was rusty, he lied. Right, Liv said, her voice high. Rusty, totally. I'll call a plumber, Dan said, pulling a sleek black phone from his wet pocket. I know a guy. I can't afford a plumber, Dan. He looked at her, water dripping from his dark hair, looking like a soaked god of war. It's on the house. Consider it an apology for the rust. Liv watched him dial. She glanced at the cookie jar where the ring was hidden. She looked at the raccoon cowering in submission. She looked at the man who ripped pipes and made thugs run away. Who are you really, Dan? She whispered to herself. But all she saw was a very wet, very hot security guard who was currently ordering a plumber to get here in 10 minutes or else. Chapter 6. The plumber arrived in 4 minutes flat. Liv had barely finished mopping up the kitchen floor with her last clean towel when there was a crisp knock at the door. She opened it to find a man who looked less like a plumber and more like a Navy SEAL who had just raided a Home Depot. He was carrying a toolbox that looked military grade, and he was wearing coveralls that were suspiciously clean. Service, the man barked, staring straight ahead. He didn't look at Liv. His eyes darted immediately to Dominic, who was leaning against the counter, still soaking wet, his shirt clinging to him like a second skin. The plumber went pale. He actually swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. Sir, the plumber choked out, I got here as fast as I could. The dispatch said it was an emergency. Sink, Dominic said. He pointed a finger at the wreckage of the pipe. Fix it, don't talk. Yes, yes. The man practically threw himself under the sink. Liv stood in the middle of her tiny kitchen, holding a dripping towel, looking between the two men. Okay, since when do plumbers call their customers sir with that much terror? Did you threaten his family, Dan? Dominic didn't look up from his phone. He was typing something rapidly. I have a preferred customer status. Right, preferred. Liv narrowed her eyes. Dan, look, I appreciate the help, really, but I can't pay for a rush job from a guy who looks like he kills people with wrenches. I have $12. Dominic finally looked up. The intensity in his dark eyes hit her like a physical weight, making the air in the kitchen feel suddenly thin. It's covered. The pipe was old. My fault. It was steel. Brittle steel, he countered smoothly. The plumber worked with terrifying speed. In less than 5 minutes, he scrambled out from under the cabinet. Done. Replaced the trap, reinforced the intake. It won't break again. Ever. Good, Dominic grunted. He pulled a thick roll of cash from his wet pocket, damp but clearly legitimate $100 bills, and peeled off 2. He handed them to the man. Tip. Leave. The plumber looked at the money like it was radioactive. No, please, I couldn't possibly. Dominic just raised an eyebrow. The plumber squeaked, grabbed the cash, bowed to Liv, actually bowed, and sprinted out the door. Liv stared at the closed door. Then she turned to Dominic. Who are you? She asked, her voice quiet. Plumbers don't bow, Dan, and security guards don't carry rolls of hundreds in their pockets. Dominic sighed. He ran a hand through his wet hair, spiking it up. I play poker. I win. And people respect me because I'm big. It's not a conspiracy, Liv. Liv? She blinked. I didn't tell you my name. Dominic froze. For a second, the mask slipped. A flash of panic crossed his stoic features. You told me in the car, before you fell asleep. I did? Liv frowned, trying to remember through the fog of exhaustion. I guess that sounds like me. I ramble. You do, he agreed, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. You need to eat. There is no food in this apartment except a bag of stale marshmallows and that raccoon's kibble. Hey, marshmallows are a food group. Get your shoes, Dominic ordered, pushing off the counter. We're going to a diner. My treat, since I broke your sink. Liv looked at him. He was dangerous. Every instinct she had, the ones that usually screamed at her to run from men in suits, was oddly silent. Instead, she felt safe, like standing behind a blast shield. Fine, she sighed, but if you try to make me eat a salad, I'm calling the police. Chapter 7. The diner was a greasy spoon called Louie's that smelled of bacon grease and regret. It was perfect. Dominic ate 4 omelets, Liv counted. He ate them with a precise, predict efficiency that was mesmerizing to watch. He didn't just eat, he demolished. So, Liv said, poking at her waffle, I'm unemployed, fired, canning, terminated. Their loss, Dominic said. He sounded like he meant it. You're resourceful. I'm chaotic, Dan. There's a difference. And chaos doesn't pay rent. She sighed, resting her chin in her hand. I have to hit the gig apps today. There's a catering job open for some corporate retreat upstate tomorrow. Pays triple the usual rate. I applied, but... Dominic's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, tapped once, and put it away. 30 seconds later, Liv's phone chimed. She picked it up. Her eyes went wide. No way, I got it. They accepted me instantly. Weird. Usually, they ask for a background check to make sure I'm not an arsonist. Fate smiles on the chaotic, Dominic said deadpan. Okay, Confucius, I need to go prep. She stood up, digging for her wallet. Dominic's hand shot out, covering hers. His hand was massive, warm, and rough. I got it, he said. Dan, go. Liv didn't argue. She had to get to the store. She ran out to the parking lot where her pride and joy was parked. The toaster was a 2008 Honda Civic that had started life silver but was now a patchwork of rust, gray primer, and bumper stickers. The muffler was held on by a wire hanger. Dominic followed her out. He stopped dead when he saw the car. He looked at the vehicle with genuine horror. "You drive this?" he asked. "On public roads?" "She has character," Liv defended, unlocking the door manually because the fob had died in 2015. "And she gets great mileage if you don't use the AC, or the radio, or turn left too fast." "Liv," Dominic said, stepping in front of the driver's side door. "You are not driving this death trap upstate. It's supposed to snow." "I have snow tires. Well, I have 2 snow tires. On the back, I think." "No." He folded his arms. "I'll drive you." "To a gig? No way. I can't show up with a bodyguard. It looks pretentious. I'm the help, Dan. The help doesn't arrive in a black tank SUV." She ducked under his arm and yanked the door open. The hinge shrieked like a dying banshee. Dominic winced. "That sound violates safety laws." "I'll be fine. Stop mother-henning me. You're not my dad, and you're not my boyfriend." She slammed the door. It took 2 tries to get it to latch, and turned the key. The engine coughed, wheezed, and finally roared to life with a sound like a lawnmower choking on rocks. Liv waved through the dirty window and peeled out of the lot. Dominic stood there, watching the rust bucket rattle down the street. He tapped his earpiece. "Marcus," he growled, "get the Rover. We're following her. If that car breaks down, I want a mechanic team on standby within 2 minutes." "Sir," Marcus's voice crackled in his ear, "you have a board meeting in 20 minutes. "Cancel it. I'm going upstate." Chapter 8. Liv stopped at a gas station on the edge of the city to fuel up the toaster and buy an energy drink that was probably 90% battery acid. As she was pumping gas, a sleek red convertible pulled up to the pump opposite her. The music was loud, thumping bass that rattled Liv's teeth. She didn't look up until a voice she hated drifted over the pump. "Liv, seriously? You're still driving that piece of junk?" Liv froze. She closed her eyes, praying for patience. She looked up. Brad, her ex. The guy who had borrowed $2,000 for his DJ career and then cheated on her with a spin instructor named Candy, with a K. "Go away, Brad," Liv said, focusing on the nozzle. "I'm busy." Brad leaned against his car, flashing a smile that used to charm her but now just looked oily. "Come on, babe, don't be like that. I heard you got fired from the Drake. Rough break. You know, if you need cash, I could let you crash at my place, for old time's sake." "I'd rather sleep in a dumpster," Liv said sweetly. "Oh, wait, that would be your place." Brad's smile vanished. He stepped around the pump, getting into her personal space. He grabbed her arm. "You got a sharp mouth, Liv. You always did. Maybe you need to learn some respect." "Let go of me." "Or what? You gonna call your raccoon?" "Let her go!" The voice didn't come from Liv. It came from behind Brad. It was low, guttural, and vibrated in the concrete. Brad turned around. Dominic was standing there. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket anymore, just a black t-shirt that showed off arms the size of tree trunks. He looked calm, terrifyingly calm. "Who the hell are you?" Brad sneered, though he took a step back. "Her bodyguard?" "Something like that," Dominic said. He didn't shout, he didn't posture, he just stared. He focused his gaze on Brad, a direct, unblinking alpha stare that bypassed the human brain and hit the lizard brain directly. The air around the pumps seemed to drop 10 degrees. The static coming off Dominic was potent. Brad turned pale. Sweat beaded on his upper lip. His knees actually shook. To him, Dominic suddenly looked 10 feet tall, a monster in human skin. I was just leaving," Brad stammered. He let go of Liv's arm like it was burning him. "Good choice," Dominic said softly. "Drive carefully. Accidents happen." Brad scrambled back into his car, fumbled his keys twice, and peeled out of the station so fast he almost took the hose with him. Liv stared at the retreating red car, then at Dominic. "Okay," she exhaled. "That was Intense. Did you just Jedi mind trick my ex-boyfriend? Dominic looked at her, the scary darkness fading from his eyes, replaced by that weird, soft look he saved just for her. He had weak knees. Must be a flu going around. You followed me, Liv accused, though she wasn't as mad as she should be. Her arms still tingled where Brad had grabbed her. She felt safe. I was getting gas, Dominic lied effortlessly, gesturing to his massive SUV parked 3 pumps away. Coincidence. You're a terrible liar, Dan. And you have bad taste in men. Brad? Really? I was young and stupid, and he had a jet ski. Dominic sighed. He tapped his earpiece. Marcus, take the SUV back to the city. I'm riding with the asset. Liv blinked. Excuse me? You are not riding in the toaster. You won't fit. I will fit, Dominic said, walking toward her passenger door with grim determination. Because I am not letting you drive that death trap through the woods alone. Unlock the door, Liv. Chapter 9. The corporate retreat was located in a dense forest about 2 hours north of Chicago. The address led to a massive iron gate that looked like it belonged to a vampire lord or a Bond villain. Liv pulled the toaster up to the intercom. The gate opened before she could even press the button. Weird, she muttered. She drove up the winding driveway. The trees here were huge, ancient pines that blocked out most of the gray sky. So, Liv said to the passenger seat, thanks for coming. I know I said I didn't need help, but honestly, hauling catering crates is backbreaking. Dominic was squeezed into the passenger seat of the Honda. His knees were practically against his chest. He looked like a giant trying to ride a tricycle. It's fine, he grunted. I like nature. You look like you want to fight the trees, Dan. They pulled up to the main lodge. It was a sprawling timber mansion that screamed old money. Several people were milling around outside. They were all fit, moving with that same athletic grace Liv had noticed at the gala. When Liv parked the rusty Honda next to a line of Range Rovers and G-Wagons, heads turned. She hopped out. Okay, let's unload. Grab the cooler with the beef. Dominic got out. The reaction was immediate. The 3 people standing on the porch, 2 men and a woman, froze. Their eyes went wide. The woman actually dropped her clipboard. They stared at Dominic. Dominic stared back, giving a microscopic shake of his head. One of the men started to kneel. Dominic glared. The man turned the kneel into a sudden awkward lunge to tie his shoe. Hey, Liv called out, waving. I'm the caterer. Sorry about the car, she's loud, but she's got spirit. The woman with the clipboard rushed forward. She looked terrified. She kept glancing at Dominic, then at Liv, then back at Dominic. Welcome, the woman squeaked. Ms. Miller? And associate? This is Dan, Liv said, slapping Dominic on his solid arm. He's my muscle. He works for sandwiches. The woman looked like she was about to faint. Dan, right. Welcome. Dan, please, let us carry those boxes for you. Nonsense, Liv said, grabbing a crate. We're here to work. Dan, grab the heavy one. Dominic silently picked up a crate that weighed at least 80 pounds. He lifted it with one hand. Show off, Liv muttered. As they walked into the lodge, Liv leaned close to Dominic. Is it me, or are these corporate people really jumpy? They act like you're the CEO undercover or something. Dominic kept his face perfectly neutral. Maybe I just have a trustworthy face. You have a face that says, I bury bodies in the woods, Dan. But it's a nice face. Chapter 10. The servants' quarters turned out to be a luxury cabin adjacent to the main lodge. This is better than my apartment, Liv said, dropping her bag on the floor. The room had a stone fireplace, a kitchenette, and one bed, Liv noted. Of course, it's always one bed. Is the universe running a rom-com script on me? I'll take the floor, Dominic said immediately. He was already pacing the perimeter of the room, checking the windows. Don't be ridiculous. You're the size of a grizzly bear. You take the bed, I'll take the couch. I do not sleep on beds when... He stopped himself. When the queen is present. I prefer the floor. Bad back. Hard surfaces help. "You are the weirdest man I have ever met." Liv unpackaged Beef. The raccoon had traveled in a cat carrier, hissing at every bump in the road. She let him out. Beef immediately waddled over to Dominic and hugged his leg. "Traitor," Liv whispered. Night fell. The forest outside was silent but heavy. Liv felt a strange energy in the air, a static charge that made her skin prickle. She fell asleep on the couch, listening to the sound of Dominic breathing from the floor. It was a steady, rhythmic sound that lulled her into the deepest sleep she'd had in years. She woke up at dawn. The light was gray and filtering through the blinds. Liv rubbed her eyes and sat up. Dominic was awake. He was in the middle of the floor, shirtless. He was doing one-armed push-up, and Beef was sitting on his back. Liv froze. Her mouth went dry. Dominic's back was a landscape of muscle and scars. Thick, jagged white lines crisscrossed his skin, claw marks. They looked old but brutal. He moved with a terrifying, fluid power, dipping down and pushing up without even breathing hard, the fat raccoon balancing perfectly between his shoulder blades. He paused at the top of a rep. He didn't look at her, but she knew he knew she was awake. "Morning," he rasped. His voice was rough with sleep and gravel. "Hi," Liv squeaked. She cleared her throat. Nice workout, partner." Dominic stood up in one fluid motion, catching Beef before the raccoon fell. He set the animal down. He turned to face her. His chest was just as scarred as his back. A long, thin line ran from his collarbone to his hip. "Dan," Liv whispered, her humor gone. "What happened to you?" Dominic grabbed a towel and wiped his face. He hesitated. He couldn't tell her, "I fought a challenger for the throne 3 years ago." "Industrial accident," he said. "Shredder." "You fell into a shredder?" "I tried to fix it while it was on." He pulled a t-shirt on, hiding the map of violence on his skin. "I wasn't very good at my job back then." Liv stood up and walked over to him. She didn't think. She reached out and touched the spot on his arm where a scar vanished under his sleeve. "You must be tougher than you look," she said softly. Dominic went perfectly still. His pupils dilated until his eyes were almost black. He leaned into her touch, just a fraction of an inch. "I heal fast," he murmured. "Coffee?" "God, yes," Liv said, stepping back, her heart racing. "Make it strong. I have a feeling today is going to be weird." She had no idea. Outside the window, 3 wolves were watching the cabin, waiting for their king to give the order to hunt. Chapter 11. Absolutely not. Dominic Rossi stood in the center of the cabin living room, staring down at the object in Liv's hands with the same look he usually reserved for rival alphas who had insulted his mother. "It's mandatory, Dan," Liv said, shaking the garment for emphasis. "Uniform policy. We have to look like a team." "It is pink," Dominic observed. His voice was flat, deadpan, and terrifyingly deep. "It's salmon," Liv corrected, "and it's the only extra-large t-shirt I have. The other one says Bride Tribe on it, and unless you want to explain that to the corporate execs, you're wearing the salmon." Dominic looked at the t-shirt. It was a promotional shirt from a failed frozen yogurt shop Liv had worked at 3 years ago. On the back, in glittery letters, it said, "Spoon me. I am the king," Dominic muttered under his breath, too low for her to hear. "I own half the city. I have killed men with my thumbs." "Stop mumbling and put it on," Liv said, tossing it to him. "We have breakfast service in 20 minutes, and I need you to carry the urns of coffee. They weigh a ton." Dominic sighed. It was a long, suffering sound that rumbled in his chest. He pulled the shirt over his head. It was tight, disturbingly tight. The cotton stretched across his chest like a second skin, outlining every ridge of muscle. The sleeves strained against his biceps, threatening to tear if he so much as flexed. The words, "spoon me," were stretched so wide across his back they were practically shouting. Liv stared. She blinked. She forgot how to breathe for a solid 3 seconds. "Okay," she squeaked, clearing her throat and looking away. "That fits. Sort of. Let's go. And try to smile, Dan. You look like you're going to a funeral for a puppy." Dominic followed her out the door, his face set in a mask of grim determination. He wasn't worried about the shirt. He was worried about his pack. 300 of the most dangerous predators in North America were currently waiting in the main lodge. They were expecting their Alpha King. Instead, they were about to get a guy named Dan wearing a pink t-shirt that asked for spooning. "If anyone laughs," Dominic whispered to the wind, "I will have them exiled to Alaska." They walked to the main lodge. The air was crisp and smelled of pine and damp earth. As they approached the service entrance, Dominic scanned the perimeter. He spotted his beta, Marcus, hiding in a bush near the porch, looking frantic. Simon made a subtle hand signal. "Stand down. Stay hidden." Marcus looked at the pink shirt. He put his hand over his mouth to stifle a scream of laughter. Dominic glared. "Alaska," he promised silently. "Definitely Alaska." Chapter 12. The breakfast buffet was a disaster of carnivorous proportions. Liv had catered corporate retreats before. Usually it was a lot of yogurt, granola, and people picking at fruit while talking about synergy. This group was different. "Dan," Liv whispered, ducking behind the carving station. "Is it me, or are these people really hungry?" Dominic stood guard over the bacon tray. He looked out at the dining hall. His subjects, men and women in high-end athletic gear, were devouring food like they hadn't eaten in weeks. One guy was eating a steak rare, like blue rare. He was basically just warming it up with his breath. "They have high metabolisms," Dominic said, crossing his arms. The seam of his shirt groaned in protest. A woman in a gray tracksuit approached the table. Liv recognized her as the CFO of the company. She looked at Dominic, saw the "spoon me" shirt, and turned purple. She started to lower her head in submission. Dominic kicked the table leg. Hard. The woman flinched, her head snapping up. Coffee?" she squeaked. "Black," Dominic growled. "Take it and go." "Yes, Dan, sir, Dan." She grabbed a cup, splashed coffee over her hand, didn't even wince, and ran away. Liv watched her go. "Why is everyone so terrified of you? You're wearing pink. You're about as threatening as a strawberry milkshake." "I have a stern face," Dominic said. "You have a 'I'm going to murder you' face. Lighten up. Here, hand out these napkins." She shoved a stack of napkins into his hand. Dominic stood there, the Alpha King of the Apex Syndicate, handing out paper napkins to wolves who looked like they wanted to crawl under the table and die rather than accept a condiment from their ruler. Things went sideways when a young guy, a new recruit, barely 20, walked up. He was too busy staring at Liv to notice Dominic. "Hey," the kid smiled, leaning on the counter. "You're the caterer? You're cute. What time do you get off?" The air in the room vanished. Every wolf in the hall stopped eating. Forks froze mid-air. The silence was absolute. Dominic didn't move. He didn't growl. He just stepped forward. The floorboards creaked under his weight. "She gets off," Dominic said, his voice dropping to a register that rattled the silverware. "When I say she does." The kid looked up. He saw Dominic. He saw the scar. He saw the eyes. The kid's face went white. He made a sound like a dying mouse. I just wanted napkins." "Take a napkin," Dominic said softly, "and run a lap. A 20-mile lap." "Yes!" The kid grabbed a napkin and literally vaulted over a chair to get out the back door. Liv stared at Dominic. "A 20-mile lap? Dan, you can't just order guests to run marathons." "He looked energetic," Dominic said, adjusting his apron. "Pass the tongs." Chapter 13. By late afternoon, Liv was exhausted. The winter sun was already dipping low behind the trees. "Okay, team-building activity," the event coordinator, a nervous woman named Sarah who smelled like fear, announced. "We're doing, a nature run. Everyone into the woods." "It's like a cult," Liv muttered, loading dirty plates into the dishwasher. "A fitness cult. I bet they drink kale smoothies and sacrifice carbs to the moon." "Something like that," Dominic said. He was tense. He had been tense all morning. Every time the wind shifted, he would pause, his nostrils flaring slightly. He kept checking his phone. Hey, Liv said, bumping his hip with hers. Relax. You're doing great. I haven't seen you threaten to kill anyone for at least an hour. The day is young, Dominic replied. He walked over to the window, staring out at the tree line. The guests were running into the woods, shifting into their wolf forms as soon as they hit the cover of the trees. Liv couldn't see that part, obviously. To her, they were just really enthusiastic joggers. Dan, Liv said, drying her hands. I need to grab more ice from the storage shed. It's out back near the trailhead. I'll go, Dominic said instantly. I need to check the inventory list. I have to go. You finish loading the washer. If you break another pipe, I'm taking it out of your tips. She walked out the back door before he could stop her. Dominic cursed. He tapped his earpiece. Marcus, eyes on her, now. I can't, Dom. Marcus's voice crackled, sounding breathless. We have a problem. We found a scent on the perimeter. Rogues. Krell's men. Dominic's blood ran cold. He didn't bother with the door handle. He kicked the back door open, splintering the frame, and sprinted after her. Liv was humming to herself as she walked down the dirt path toward the ice shed. The woods were quiet. Too quiet. Even the birds had stopped singing. She heard a twig snap behind her. Dan, she called out, turning around. If you're trying to scare me, it's not working. I grew up in Chicago. I have pepper spray. No answer. A shadow moved in the trees to her left. It wasn't Dan. It was too small, too slinking. A man stepped out from behind a large oak. He was dirty, unshaven, and he was smiling in a way that made Liv's skin crawl. Hello, little mouse, the man said. Liv reached into her pocket for her pepper spray, breath mint. Back off, creep. I have really fresh breath, and I'm not afraid to use it. The man laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. The king has terrible taste. He lunged. Chapter 14. Liv didn't scream. She didn't have time. The man moved impossibly fast, covering the 10 feet between them in a blink. Liv raised her arm, bracing for impact, shutting her eyes tight. Whoosh! A gust of wind hit her, smelling of ozone and fury. There was a sickening crack, like a baseball bat hitting a watermelon. Liv opened her eyes. The creep was gone. He wasn't standing in front of her anymore. He was 20 feet away, wrapped around a tree trunk, groaning, crumpled like a discarded wrapper. Standing in front of her, his back to her, was Dan. But it wasn't the Dan she knew. He was vibrating. A low, continuous noise was coming from his chest, a sound that wasn't human. It was a growl, deep and primal, like a tectonic plate shifting. His posture was monstrous. His shoulders were hunched, his hands curled into claws at his sides. Dan? Liv whispered. The man by the tree tried to stand up. He spat blood. You can't kill me here. The treaty. Dominic moved. It was a blur. Liv rubbed her eyes. 1 second he was in front of her, the next he was holding the man by the throat, lifting him 2 feet off the ground against the tree. There is no treaty, Dominic snarled. His voice was distorted, layered, like 2 voices speaking at once, man and beast. Not for her. He threw the man. Not pushed, threw. The attacker flew through the air like a rag doll and crashed into the dense brush, vanishing into the ravine below. Silence returned to the woods. Dominic stood there, chest heaving. He didn't turn around. Liv took a step forward, her legs shaking. Dan, that guy, you just threw him, like a frisbee. Dominic flinched when she spoke. He stayed facing away from her. Go back to the cabin, Liv. Dan, you're hurt. She saw a slice on his arm, bleeding sluggishly. The other guy must have had a knife she didn't see. Go! He roared. The sound was so loud it shook the leaves off the trees. It wasn't a shout. It was a bark, a command. Liv stumbled back, terrified. For the first time, she wasn't looking at Dan, the security guard. She was looking at something dangerous. Okay, she whispered, tears pricking her eyes. Okay, I'm going. She turned and ran back toward the lodge, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Dominic waited until he couldn't hear her footsteps anymore. Then he fell to his knees, digging his fingers into the dirt. The change was coming. The rage was too hot. He couldn't stop it. Bones cracked, fur burst through skin, and the Alpha King howled, a sound of pure, unadulterated violence that made every wolf in a 10-mile radius drop to their belly in submission. Chapter 15. Liv locked the cabin door. Then she pushed the dresser in front of it. Then she pushed the armchair in front of the dresser. She sat on the floor, hugging her knees, Beef the raccoon curled tightly in her lap. "He's on steroids," she told the raccoon. "That's the only explanation. He's on roids or PCP or he's a government experiment. Did you see how far he threw that guy? That's not physics, Beef. That's Looney Tunes logic." Beef chirped quietly, burying his nose in her sweater. 2 hours passed. The sun went down. There was a scratch at the door. Not a knock, a scratch. "Go away!" Liv yelled, grabbing a fire poker from the fireplace. "Liv." It was Dan. His voice was wrecked, hoarse, raspy, and weak. "I'm not opening it," Liv said, aiming the poker at the wood. "You yelled at me, and you threw a man into a ravine." "He survived," Dan said through the door. "Unfortunately." "That doesn't make me feel better." "Liv, please, I need—" There was a thud, like a heavy body sliding down the doorframe. "I locked myself out, and I don't have my key." Liv hesitated. She listened. His breathing was ragged, wet, and shallow. He sounded hurt. "Dan?" She pulled the chair away. She shoved the dresser back. She unlocked the door. Dominic was sitting on the porch step, leaning against the doorframe. He looked terrible. His clothes were shredded. The pink Spoon Me t-shirt was in tatters, hanging off him in ribbons. He was covered in dirt and scratches. He was shivering violently. Liv dropped the poker. "Oh my God." She fell to her knees beside him. "You're freezing, and you're burning up." She touched his forehead. It was scorching hot. "Don't," he groaned, flinching away from her hand. "Don't touch me." "Shut up, you're sick." "It's not sickness." He squeezed his eyes shut. The rut was crashing over him like a tidal wave. The adrenaline from the fight had triggered the biological imperative to claim. Being this close to her, smelling her scent, was agony. Every cell in his body wanted to drag her inside and mark her. He was using every ounce of his will to keep his hands to himself. "I need ice," he gritted out. "Cold shower. Lock me in the bathroom." "I'm not locking you in a bathroom. I'm calling an ambulance." "No!" He grabbed her wrist. His grip was bruising, then instantly softened. "No doctors, no cops, just get me inside. Please." Liv looked at him. His eyes were desperate. The darkness in them was swirling, terrifying, but beneath it was a pleading look she couldn't ignore. "Fine," she whispered. "But if you turn into a werewolf or something, I'm going to be really mad." Dominic let out a choked, hysterical laugh. "Deal." She draped his arm over her shoulder. He was heavy, a dead weight of muscle and heat. She dragged him inside, kicking the door shut against the night. Chapter 16. The bathroom was the size of Liv's entire apartment back in Chicago, which was lucky because dragging 250 pounds of delirious, overheating muscle into it was not a one-person job. "Dan, you have to help me," Liv panted, her boots sliding on the tiled floor. "Walk! Move your feet! Do not pass out!" Dominic stumbled. His skin was radiating heat like a radiator that had been cranked past the safety limit. Through his shredded t-shirt, his skin looked flushed, almost fever-bright. He wasn't sweating, he was burning. "Leave," he growled, the sound vibrating against her shoulder. "Dangerous! Too close!" "Shut up!" Liv snapped. She kicked the shower door open. "Get in!" She didn't wait for him to agree. She shoved him. Dominic hit the back wall of the shower stall with a heavy thud, sliding down until he was sitting on the expensive slate tiles, his legs sprawled out. He looked like a fallen giant, head hanging low, chest heaving. Liv reached in and twisted the handle to the coldest setting. The spray hit him instantly. Ice-cold water hammered down on his overheated skin. Dominic roared. It wasn't a scream of pain, it was a sound of shock and primal fury. He lunged forward, grabbing the glass door, his knuckles turning white. His eyes snapped open, and for a second, Liv swore they were glowing. Not just reflecting light, but actually glowing a deep, terrifying gold. "Stay back!" he barked, his voice cracking. "I'm not leaving you!" Liv yelled back over the sound of the water. She grabbed a towel and knelt just outside the spray, terrified but stubborn. "You're burning up, Dan. You're having a heat stroke or a reaction to those steroids I know you're taking." Dominic leaned his forehead against the cool glass, the water plastering his dark hair to his skull. He was shaking violently now. The cold was warring with the biological fire of the rut, confusing his system, forcing the wolf to retreat just enough for the man to breathe. He looked at her through the glass. She was small, soaked from the spray, hair frizzy and wild, clutching a fluffy white towel like a shield. She looked terrified, and she was still there. "Liv," he choked out. "Go, lock the door." "No." She reached out and placed her hand against the glass, right where his hand was. "You saved me from that creep in the woods. I'm not leaving you to melt in a shower." Dominic stared at her hand. He wanted to break the glass. He wanted to drag her in, soak her in his scent, bite the junction of her neck and shoulder until everyone knew she belonged to the king. Instead, he closed his eyes and let the freezing water batter him into submission. "Talk to me," he commanded, his voice rough. "Just talk. Distract me." "Okay," Liv stammered. "Okay. Beef. The raccoon. He stole my keys last week. I found them in the microwave. I don't know how he opened the microwave, Dan. I think he's evolving. I think he's going to take over the world and enslave humanity for shiny wrappers." She babbled. She told him about her third-grade teacher. She told him about the time she tried to bake a souffle and set her curtains on fire. She talked until her throat was dry and the water running off Dominic's body wasn't steaming anymore. Chapter 17. An hour later, the crisis had passed. Dominic was sitting on the bath mat, his back against the vanity cabinet. He was wearing a pair of dry sweatpants he'd found in his bag, but he was shirtless. The towel Liv had given him was draped over his head like a boxer after a losing fight. Liv sat on the closed toilet lid, watching him. The air in the bathroom was humid and quiet. "You scared me," she whispered. Dominic pulled the towel down, revealing his face. The feverish flush was gone, replaced by a pale exhaustion. The scar through his eyebrow looked stark against his skin. "I apologize," he said formally. "I have episodes. Adrenaline crashes." "That wasn't adrenaline, Dan. You were growling. You threw a human being 50 feet. She crossed her arms, hugging herself. "Who are you? And don't give me the security guard crap. Security guards don't have military-grade PTSD and super strength." Dominic looked at his hands. His healing factor was already working. The slice on his arm from the knife was just a faint pink line now. He covered it with a towel. He had to lie, but he couldn't lie completely. Not to her. "I work for a private contractor," he said slowly. "We handle specialized threats, things the police can't touch. High-risk asset protection." "So, like, a mercenary?" "A problem solver," he corrected. "I was enhanced during my service. Experimental treatments to increase endurance. It has side effects." It was the closest thing to the truth he could offer. The enhancement was the wolf. The service was the throne. Liv stared at him, processing this. "Enhanced? Like Captain America?" Dominic snorted, a low sound of amusement. "Less patriotic, more painful." Liv slid off the toilet seat and sat on the floor next to him. She didn't touch him, but she was close enough that he could smell the vanilla soap she used. "Is the guy in the woods one of the problems you solve?" "He was a rival contractor," Dominic said, his jaw tightening. "He wanted to hurt you to get to me, to throw me off my game." He turned his head, locking eyes with her. "It won't happen again, I swear it." Liv looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the violence in him, yes, but she also saw the way he had placed himself between her and danger without hesitation. She saw the man who had let her ramble about raccoons to keep himself sane. She reached out and took his hand. His fingers were still cold from the shower. "You're a mess, Dan," she said softly. "I know. But you're my mess. For now." She squeezed his hand. "Let's get you to bed. The floor is hard and I promised you the bed." "I can't take the bed," he argued weakly. "Shut up, Captain America. You're taking the bed." Chapter 18. The sun hit Liv's face like a physical slap. She groaned and rolled over, burying her face in the pillow. Wait, pillow? She opened one eye. She was in the bed. The sheets were high thread count cotton, soft and luxurious. She wasn't alone. A heavy, warm weight was draped over her waist. An arm, a massive, heavy, tattooed arm. Liv froze. Memories of the night before came flooding back. The shower, the floor, helping him into bed. She must have fallen asleep sitting next to him, and at some point... She shifted slightly. Dominic was spooning her. He was a furnace of heat against her back. His face was buried in her hair, his breathing deep and even. He felt solid, safe, and immovable. For a guy who claimed to have touch starvation issues, he sure was cuddly when he was unconscious. And on top of Dominic's other arm, which was sprawled across the duvet, Beef. The raccoon was asleep, belly up, snoring softly, clutching a half-eaten granola bar. Liv bit her lip to keep from laughing. The Alpha King, or super soldier mercenary, whatever he was currently a mattress for a trash panda and a pillow for her. She didn't want to move. She wanted to stay in this warm, safe bubble forever. But reality, as usual, had to ruin everything. Dominic's phone, which was on the nightstand, buzzed. Dominic went from dead asleep to fully awake in 0 seconds. His arm tightened around her waist instinctively, pulling her closer before his brain caught up. He released her and sat up, rubbing his face. "Sorry," he rumbled, his voice gravelly with sleep. "It's fine," Liv said, sitting up and trying to fix her hair. "You're a restless sleeper. You cling." Dominic looked at the raccoon sleeping on his bicep. He gently poked Beef's stomach. The raccoon chirped and rolled over. "I need to check this," Dominic said, grabbing his phone. He read the text. His expression darkened immediately. The soft, sleepy boyfriend vibe vanished, replaced by the cold, hard mask of the king. Text from Marcus. "Perimeter breached in Sector 4. Krell is escalating. We need you at the command center. Now!" Dominic cursed under his breath. He swung his legs out of bed. "Liv, stay here. Do not open the door for anyone but me. I have to go check on the team." "Is it the bad guys again?" Liv asked, clutching the duvet. "I'm going to finish it," Dominic said. He stood up, grabbing a fresh shirt from his bag. He paused at the door, looking back at her. "Lock the door behind me." He left. The cabin felt instantly colder without him. Chapter 19. Liv lasted exactly 45 minutes before she got bored. She had locked the door. She had fed Beef. She had paced the length of the cabin 12 times. "This is ridiculous," she told the raccoon. "I'm hungry. And Dan, the giant, didn't eat anything last night. He needs protein. If he's a super soldier, he probably burns like 10,000 calories a day." She looked at the empty fridge in the cabin. Nothing but water and a questionable jar of olives. "I'm going to the lodge," she decided. "It's daylight. There are people everywhere. I'll just grab some eggs and bacon and run back. 5 minutes. Beef ignored her, busy trying to open the zipper on her suitcase. Liv grabbed her coat. She checked the window. The path to the main lodge was clear. She could see joggers in the distance. It looked safe. "Be right back, Beef. Don't steal anything expensive." She unlocked the door and stepped out. The morning air was biting cold but fresh. She hurried down the path, her boots crunching on the gravel. The walk to the lodge was uneventful. She grabbed a takeout container from the kitchen, piled it high with scrambled eggs, sausages, and biscuits. The kitchen staff gave her wide berths, whispering. Liv assumed it was because of the pink shirt incident yesterday. Yeah, laugh it up," she muttered, grabbing 2 coffees. She walked back quickly, juggling the food and drinks. When she got back to the cabin, the door was ajar. Liv stopped. Her heart skipped a beat. "I locked that," she whispered. The coffee cups grew hot in her hands. I definitely locked that. She took a step forward. Dan, you back? Silence. She crept up the steps and pushed the door open with her foot. The cabin was a wreck. The table was overturned. The lamp was smashed. The cushions from the couch had been ripped apart, stuffing covering the floor like snow. It looked like a tornado had touched down inside the room. Beef? Liv called out, panic rising in her throat. Beefy! No chattering, no rustling. She ran inside, dropping the food. Beef! She checked under the bed. She checked the bathroom. The raccoon was gone. In the center of the room, pinned to the wall with a wicked-looking hunting knife, was a piece of paper. Liv walked toward it, her hands shaking. She pulled the knife out of the wall. It was heavy, sharp, and definitely not a kitchen utensil. She unfolded the paper. It was a handwritten note, scrawled in thick black marker. Chapter 20. Dominic tore through the woods, Marcus at his heels. "Where is he?" Dominic roared. "You said Sector 4. "It was a decoy, Dom," Marcus yelled, struggling to keep up. "They lit a fire to draw us out. The real breach was the cabins. They circled back." Dominic's heart stopped. Liv. He didn't run, he blurred. He tore through the underbrush, ignoring the branches whipping his face. He pushed his body faster than it was meant to go, fueled by pure, unadulterated terror. He burst into the clearing. Liv was standing on the porch of the cabin. She was alive. She was standing up. Dominic almost collapsed with relief. He slowed to a jog, panting heavily. "Liv!" She turned to look at him. Her face wasn't terrified. It wasn't relieved. It was confused and angry. She was holding a piece of paper in her hand. "Dan," she said. Her voice was flat. Dominic walked up the steps, his chest heaving. "Are you hurt? Did they touch you?" "They took Beef," she said. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them back furiously. "They took my raccoon, Dan. They trashed the room and they stole my pet." "I will get him back," Dominic swore. "I will burn the forest down to get him back." "Why did they take him?" Liv asked. She held up the paper. Dominic looked at the note. "We have the king's mate. Bring the seal to the old mill at midnight, or the little beast dies. Krell." Dominic stared at the words. The king's mate. Krell thought Beef was the mate. Because Dominic had been guarding the cabin, and Beef was the only other living thing inside when Krell's men broke in, while Liv was getting eggs. They had smelled Dominic's scent all over the raccoon from the night before. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was the word king. Liv looked at Dominic. She looked at the note. She looked back at Dominic. "Dan," she said slowly, "why does this kidnapper think you're a king?" Dominic opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "And why," Liv continued, her voice trembling, "does he think my raccoon is your mate?" "Liv," Dominic started, taking a step forward. "Don't!" She stepped back, holding the knife she'd pulled from the wall. "You said you were security. Then you said you were a mercenary. Now this note says you're a king." She narrowed her eyes. Are you the leader of a LARPing group?" Dominic blinked. "What?" "Live-action role-play," Liv shouted, waving the note. "Is this whole thing a game? Is that why everyone bows? Is that why you speak in Old English sometimes? Did you drag me into a dangerous role-playing game where people kidnap raccoons?" Dominic stared at her. He could tell her the truth. He could tell her he was a werewolf alpha, or he could let her believe he was a super intense nerd. "Yes," Dominic lied. It is a game, a very serious one." Liv threw her hands up. "You have got to be kidding me. You're not a super soldier. You're a king of nerds." "We have to get Beef back," Dominic said, pivoting. "Game or not, they have him." "You're right," Liv said, grabbing her purse. "We're going to the old mill, and you're going to explain why your game involves real knives." She stormed past him to the car. Dominic closed his eyes and exhaled. "I am going to kill Krell," he whispered to the wind, slowly. Chapter 21. The toaster was shaking. The speedometer needle was vibrating violently around the 65-mile-per-hour mark, and the entire dashboard was rattling like a bag of loose bones. "Can this vehicle go any faster?" Dominic asked. He was gripping the passenger door handle so hard the plastic was starting to crack under his fingers. "She's doing her best, Dan," Liv shouted over the roar of the engine. "We're going uphill. Stop body-shaming my car." Dominic looked out the window at the passing trees. They were blurring, but not fast enough. Every second that ticked by was a second beef was in the hands of Victor Krell. And worse, Krell thought the raccoon was the mate. "We have a problem," Dominic said, his voice low and serious. "The note. It demands the seal." "The seal," Liv repeated, white-knuckling the steering wheel. "Right, your LARP prop. Do we have it? Is it in your bag of holding? Or do we need to stop at a craft store and buy some glitter glue?" Dominic rubbed his temples. The lie was holding, but barely. "It's not a prop, Liv. It's a very expensive custom-made ring. Platinum, with a wolf crest." Liv frowned, keeping her eyes on the road. "A ring? Like a signet ring?" "Yes." "Heavy? Kind of ugly? Looks like something a villain in a Bond movie would wear?" Dominic looked at her sharply. "It is an ancient heirloom of my guild. And yes." "Oh," Liv said, "that's what Beef found." The air in the car vanished. Dominic turned in his seat, the seatbelt straining against his massive chest. "What did you say?" "Beef found a ring like that," Liv said casually, swerving to avoid a pothole. "The morning after the gala. He was washing it in the cat bowl. I thought it was cheap costume jewelry you dropped. You know, part of your security guard costume." Dominic felt lightheaded. The lost seal. The symbol of his authority. The object wars had been fought over. It had been in a cat bowl. "Where is it, Liv?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "I put it in the cookie fund jar, in my kitchen." "In Chicago?" "Yeah, where else?" Dominic closed his eyes and let his head thud back against the headrest. The ring was 200 miles away. Krell wanted it at midnight. They were arriving empty-handed. "Okay," Dominic exhaled. "Okay, we don't have the seal." "So we bluff," Liv said, her jaw set. "It's a role-playing game, right? We role-play. I'll go in there, demand my raccoon, and tell this Krell guy that the seal is, I don't know, being polished or cursed. Can items be cursed in your game?" Dominic looked at her. She was terrified. He could smell the spike of adrenaline in her scent, but she was driving a rusting Honda into a den of wolves to save a raccoon, armed with nothing but a breath mint and sarcasm. "Yes," Dominic said softly, watching her profile. "Items can be cursed. We will tell him the ring is cursed." "Great! I'm good at lying to nerds. I went to art school." Chapter 22. The old mill lived up to its name. It was a rotting, skeletal structure sitting on the edge of a churning river. The windows were broken, staring out like empty eye sockets. The wind howled through the gaps in the wood, carrying the scent of damp rot and wet dog. Liv killed the engine. The silence that followed was heavy. "Spooky," she whispered. "Your LARP group has great location scouts, very atmospheric." "Liv," Dominic said, turning to her. He reached out and grabbed her hand. "Listen to me. These people, they take the game too seriously. They are physical. They won't stop hitting you just because you say time out." "I know," Liv said, squeezing his hand back. "They threw you into a ravine, Dan. I get it. They're hardcore." "You stay in the car. I go in. I get the raccoon. I come back." Liv looked at him like he had just suggested she eat a tire. "No." "Liv." "That is my raccoon, Dan. I raised him from a nugget. I bottle-fed him. If you think I'm sitting in the car while some guy named Krell pokes him with a stick, you're crazy." She reached into her purse and pulled out the hunting knife she'd taken from the cabin wall. "Besides, I'm armed." Dominic looked at the knife. It looked like a toothpick in her hand. "Do you know how to use that?" "Pointy end goes into the bad guy. It's intuitive." She opened the door and stepped out into the mud. Dominic cursed under his breath. He tapped his earpiece, forgetting for a second that Marcus wasn't in range. He was alone. No backup. Just him, a human girl, and a hostage raccoon. He got out of the car. He moved differently now, shifting his weight, making himself look bigger, if that was possible. He stepped in front of Liv. "Stay behind me," he ordered. "If I say run, you run. You don't ask why, you don't look back. You run to the car and you leave. Understood?" "I'm not leaving without—" "Understood?" he roared. Liv flinched, then nodded. "Okay. Loud and clear, Captain." They moved toward the mill. Dominic didn't use the front door. He led her around the side, moving through the shadows with a silence that unnerved her. He didn't crunch on the gravel. He didn't rustle the grass. He moved like smoke. "You're really good at sneaking for a guy the size of a fridge," Liv whispered. "Stealth class," Dominic muttered. Chapter 23. The inside of the mill was cavernous and smelled terrible. It smelled like wet fur, sweat, and cheap cologne. Dominic led Liv up a rotting staircase to a catwalk that overlooked the main grinding floor. They crouched behind a pile of old flour sacks. Below them, 3 men were standing around a metal cage. The cage was covered with a heavy canvas tarp. "That's them," Dominic breathed. "Krell's lieutenants." Liv peeked over the sacks. "They look normal. I expected cloaks or armor. They're wearing tracksuits." "Modern setting," Dominic whispered. One of the men below kicked the cage. "Quiet in there, Your Majesty," he sneered. A distinct, angry hiss came from under the tarp. "She's feisty," the second man laughed. "The king has his hands full with this one. I heard she bit Krell's finger when he tried to check her teeth." "Bit him clean to the bone," the first man agreed. "Vicious little thing. Smells good, though. Like the king. The scent marking is strong." Liv ducked back down, her eyes wide. "Okay, they are really committed to the bit. Your Majesty? They're calling beef a queen?" "It's a plot point," Dominic said, sweat forming on his brow. "They think the captive is my queen." "So they think beef is a human woman?" Liv whispered, trying to wrap her head around the logic. "But he's hissing, and he's 10 pounds." "They haven't looked under the tarp," Dominic improvised. "It's a blind capture scenario. They aren't allowed to look until the ritual." "This game has too many rules," Liv grumbled. "And why are they sniffing him? Scent marking? That's weird, Dan, even for nerds." "Shh." Dominic pressed a hand to her shoulder. Below them, the heavy iron doors of the mill groaned open. Victor Krell walked in. He looked exactly like a villain. He wore a long wool coat with the collar popped, shiny dress shoes, and enough hair gel to withstand a hurricane. He walked with an arrogant swagger, flanked by 2 massive bodyguards. "Has the king arrived?" Krell shouted, his voice echoing off the rusty machinery. "Not yet, Alpha," one of the tracksuits replied. "Good," Krell smiled, showing too many teeth. "Bring out the hostage. I want to see what Dominic Rossi values so much that he'd give up his crown." The guard reached for the tarp. "Oh, God," Liv whispered. "This is going to be awkward." Chapter 24. The guard whipped the canvas tarp off the cage with a dramatic flourish. "Behold!" Krell shouted, spreading his arms. "The king's mate!" Silence. Absolute, confusing silence descended on the mill. Inside the cage, sitting on a pile of dirty straw, was Beef. The raccoon was currently holding a half-eaten cracker he had found somewhere. He paused mid-chew, looking out at the room with beady, judgmental black eyes. Krell blinked. He lowered his arms. He squinted at the cage. "What is that?" Krell asked. "It's, The guard leaned in, looking closer. "It's small and hairy." "I can see that," Krell roared. "Where is the girl? Where is the woman who smells like Rossi?" "This is all that was in the cabin, Alpha," the guard stammered, backing away. "The scent is all over it. It smells like Rossi's pheromones. We thought, maybe she shifted? Maybe she's a shifter too." Krell walked up to the cage. He stared at Beef. Beef stared at Krell. Beef slowly extended a little black hand through the bars and extended his middle finger claw. Liv gasped from the catwalk. "He learned that from me." Krell's face turned a violent shade of red. "It's a raccoon. You kidnapped a raccoon. You called me down here to the sacred meeting ground to negotiate for a rodent? Trash panda! Liv yelled. She couldn't help it. The insult to her son was too much. She stood up from behind the flour sacks. He is a raccoon, you cheap suit-wearing hack, and his name is Beef. Every head in the room snapped up. Dominic closed his eyes. Plan B, he muttered. Who is that? Krell demanded, pointing at the catwalk. I'm the manager, Liv shouted, waving her knife. And I'd like to speak to whoever is running this circus. You stole my pet. Do you know how hard it is to domesticate a wild animal? He has dietary restrictions. Krell looked at Liv. Then he looked at Dominic, who was slowly rising to stand beside her, looking like a thundercloud in human form. Krell started to laugh. It was a cold, cruel sound. Ah, Krell smiled. There she is, the real mate, and the king. Give me the animal, Dominic said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried perfectly. And I will let you walk out of here with your legs attached. You don't have the seal, do you? Krell guessed, seeing empty hands. You came here to bluff. I don't need a ring to kill you, Victor, Dominic growled. Kill? Liv hissed at him. Dan, stick to the script. Defeat. We don't say kill. Krell signaled his men. Get them. Kill the king, keep the girl, and drown that rat. Beef hissed and threw his cracker at Krell. Chapter 25. Run! Dominic shouted. He didn't wait for the stairs. He vaulted over the railing of the catwalk, dropping 20 feet to the floor below. He landed in a crouch, the concrete cracking under his boots. Liv screamed, Dan, you're not supposed to do your own stunts! The 3 guards in tracksuits rushed him. Dominic moved. It wasn't fighting, it was demolition. He caught the first guard's fist, twisted, and threw him into a pile of crates. The second guard tried to tackle him. Dominic simply stiff-armed him in the chest, sent him flying backward as if he'd been hit by a truck. He couldn't shift, not with Liv watching. He had to fight as a man, but a man with the strength of a monster. Liv wasn't staying put. She ran down the stairs, clutching her knife. She saw a guard heading for the cage, reaching for the latch to dump it into the river sluice. Hey! Liv screamed. She reached into her purse. She bypassed the knife. She grabbed the pepper spray, wintergreen blast. She sprinted up to the guard. Open wide! She sprayed the entire canister directly into his eyes and open mouth. Ah! It's minty! The guard screamed, clutching his face. It burns like Christmas! Liv kicked him in the shin. He went down. She grabbed the cage. I got you, Beefy, she panted. Liv, move! Dominic's voice boomed. She looked up. Krell was coming at her, and Krell looked wrong. His face was contorted, his teeth looked too sharp, and his eyes were glowing yellow. Special effects contacts, Liv told herself frantically. Just contacts. Krell swiped at her. His nails were long, like claws. They tore through the sleeve of her coat. Hey! Liv yelled, swinging the heavy metal cage like a purse. Clang! The corner of the cage connected with Krell's nose. There was a sickening crunch. Krell howled. He staggered back, clutching his face. Dominic was there in a second. He shoulder-checked Krell, sending the villain skidding across the floor. Dominic grabbed Liv by the waist with one arm, grabbed the cage with the other. We're leaving! He ran. He didn't use the door. He ran straight at the boarded-up window overlooking the river. Dan! Window! Liv screamed. Brace! Dominic smashed through the wood and glass. They went airborne. For a second, they were flying over the dark water of the river. They landed on the muddy bank below, rolling. Dominic took the brunt of the impact, curling his body around Liv and the raccoon. He sprang up instantly, hauling her to her feet. Car! Now! They scrambled up the embankment to where the toaster was parked. Liv fumbled with her keys. She dropped them in the mud. Move over! Dominic roared. He didn't bother with the handle. He smashed his elbow through the driver's side window, showering the seat in glass, and reached in to unlock the door. He shoved Liv into the passenger seat and dove behind the wheel. He hot-wired the car in 2 seconds. Sparks flew. The engine roared. You know how to hotwire a Honda? Liv gasped, hugging the cage. I have a diverse skill set, Dominic yelled, throwing the car into reverse. They peeled out of the lot, mud spraying everywhere, leaving the old mill and a very confused, mint-scented pack of wolves behind them. Chapter 26. The toaster was not built for high-speed chases, but fear was a powerful additive to gasoline. Dominic drove with one hand on the wheel and the other gripping the center console so hard the plastic was warping. The speedometer was buried past 80, and the car was shaking violently, vibrating Liv's teeth in her skull. "Dan!" Liv shouted over the roaring wind coming through the broken driver's side window. "We are going to die! Not from the LARPers, but because my tire alignment is terrible." "We are not stopping," Dominic growled. His eyes were glued to the rearview mirror. "Krell knows we don't have the seal. He knows we were bluffing." "So?" Liv hugged the cage in her lap. Beef was chattering anxiously, reaching his paws through the bars to hold onto her sleeve. "We have the raccoon. Mission accomplished. Let's go to a police station." "Police can't help with this." Dominic swerved around a semi-truck, cutting across 3 lanes of traffic. Horns blared. "Krell isn't going to stop. He needs the seal to challenge my claim. If he gets it, he takes everything." "The ring?" Liv blinked. "He wants the ring in my cookie jar that badly? It's just a game prop." "It represents leadership," Dominic said, his voice tight. "Whoever holds the ring holds the territory. If Krell gets to your apartment before we do, he wins, and he will burn your building down to find it." Liv went cold. "My neighbors. Mrs. Higgins next door, she's 80. She can't outrun a fire." "Then we beat him there." Dominic floored the gas pedal. The Honda engine screamed in protest. Liv looked at the ignition. Wires were pulled out, twisted together to bypass the key she had lost in the mud. "By the way," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "since when do security guards learn how to hotwire cars in 2 seconds flat? Is that part of the training?" Dominic hesitated. "YouTube," he lied. "I watch a lot of tutorials." "You watched a tutorial on how to steal a 2008 Honda Civic?" "It is a very common car," he said defensively. Liv stared at him. He was covered in mud, his shirt was torn, he had jumped 20 feet off a catwalk, and he was driving like a maniac. He was terrifying. And yet, she had never felt safer. "You're a bad liar, Dan," she whispered, "but you're a really good driver." Dominic's jaw clenched. "Call Marcus. My phone is in my pocket. I can't let go of the wheel." Liv fished the phone out of his pocket. The screen was cracked. She dialed the contact labeled Beta. "Boss?" Marcus's voice came through, sounding panicked. "We lost your signal. Where are you?" "Chicago," Dominic barked. "Krell is heading for the south side. Sector 9. Meet us there. Bring everyone." "Everyone?" "The whole pack, Marcus. We end this tonight." Chapter 27. They hit the city limits as the sun was setting, painting the Chicago skyline in bruised purples and bloody oranges. Dominic didn't slow down for red lights. He wove through the evening traffic with supernatural reflexes, the Honda scraping guardrails and bouncing over potholes. "We're close," Liv gasped, gripping the dashboard. "Turn left here. No, left!" They screeched around the corner onto her street. It was quiet, too quiet. "I don't see his car," Liv said, scanning the curb. "Maybe we beat him?" Dominic slammed the brakes. The car skidded to a halt in front of her building. "Get out! Run!" They scrambled out of the car. Liv grabbed her purse, with the knife and the cage. Dominic didn't bother locking the car, mostly because the driver's side window was completely shattered. They sprinted up the stairs. The elevator had been broken since 2012, so they took the steps 2 at a time. Liv's lungs burned, but adrenaline pushed her forward. 4th floor, apartment 4B. Liv reached for her pocket. "My keys!" she cried, panic spiking. "I dropped them at the mill." "Stand back," Dominic ordered. He didn't wind up. He didn't hesitate. He just lifted his leg and kicked the door right next to the deadbolt. Crack! The wood splintered like balsa. The door flew open, banging against the interior wall. "Okay," Liv panted, rushing inside. "Remind me not to lock myself out when you're around." The apartment was exactly as she had left it. Messy, cozy. The brand new steel pipe under the sink gleamed in the dim light, surrounded by the towels she hadn't had time to wash. "The jar!" Dominic shouted. "Get the jar!" Liv ran to the kitchen counter. There it was, the ceramic jar shaped like a fat chef. The label said, "Cookie Fund." She grabbed it. She reached inside. Her fingers brushed against cold, heavy metal. "Got it!" she yelled, pulling out the platinum signet ring. It gleamed in the dim light, the wolf crest looking ominous. "Give it to me," Dominic said. "Step into the kitchen." He held out his hand. Liv moved to hand it to him. Crash! The living room window exploded inward. Glass showered the rug. A massive figure leaped from the fire escape into the room. It was Krell. He looked horrific. His nose was swollen and purple from the cage impact. His coat was shredded, and his eyes were glowing a bright, sick yellow. "So," Krell snarled, his voice distorted and guttural. "The Cookie Fund. How domestic." Two more men climbed in behind him. They were holding crowbars. Dominic stepped in front of Liv. He didn't look like a security guard anymore. He looked like death. "Get behind the fridge," Dominic told her. "Do not come out." Chapter 28. "You think you can take me?" Krell laughed, stepping over the shattered glass. "In this tiny room? Without shifting? You'll destroy the building, Rossi." "I don't need to shift to break you," Dominic said. His voice dropped an octave, vibrating the dishes in the sink. Krell lunged. It wasn't a human fight. It was a collision of titans. Krell slammed into Dominic, driving him back into the kitchen island. The granite countertop cracked in half with a sound like a gunshot. Liv screamed, scrambling behind the refrigerator. She peeked out. Dominic grabbed Krell by the lapels and headbutted him. Thwack! Krell staggered back, blood spraying from his already broken nose. But the two other men rushed in. One swung a crowbar. It connected with Dominic's ribs with a sickening crunch. Dominic didn't even flinch. He grabbed the crowbar, ripped it out of the man's hands, and bent it into a U-shape before tossing it aside. He backhanded the man, sent him flying through the drywall into the bathroom. "The ring!" Krell shouted to the remaining henchmen. "Get the girl! Get the ring!" The third man turned toward the fridge. He saw Liv. Liv held up her hunting knife. Her hand was shaking, but her eyes were fierce. "Come and get it, ugly!" The man laughed and reached for her. "Beef! Attack!" Liv shrieked. She kicked the latch on the cage she had dropped by her feet. The door sprang open. Beef, furious from the car ride and the confinement, exploded out of the cage like a furry cannonball. He didn't go for the ankles. He went for the face. The raccoon latched onto the henchman's head, screeching and clawing. The man screamed, flailing around, trying to rip the animal off. "Good boy!" Liv cheered. But Krell had recovered. He pulled a knife, a long silver blade that glinted with a dark coating. Wolfsbane. He lunged at Dominic, who was distracted by Liv's scream. Krell drove the knife toward Dominic's side. Dominic caught Krell's wrist inches from his ribs. They froze there, locked in a contest of strength. Krell was pushing with everything he had, his eyes glowing, his teeth extending into fangs. "Die," Krell hissed. "Give me the crown." Dominic's eyes went pitch black. The static in the room became unbearable. The light bulbs in the kitchen flickered and burst. "You want the crown?" Dominic roared. He twisted Krell's wrist. "Snap!" Krell shrieked, dropping the knife. Dominic didn't stop. He grabbed Krell by the throat and the belt, lifted him entirely over his head, and ran. He ran straight for the broken window. "Have a nice flight," Dominic growled. He threw Krell through the jagged remains of the frame, launching him clear over the iron railing of the fire escape. There was a long scream as Krell plummeted 4 stories down, followed by a distant, heavy thud on the dumpster in the alley below. Dominic stood panting by the window. The henchman with the raccoon on his face decided he wasn't paid enough for this, threw Beef onto the sofa, and bolted out the front door. From the bathroom, there was a soft groan, followed by the sound of a body slumping against the tile. The first henchman was out cold. Silence fell over the apartment. Chapter 29. Liv stood up slowly from behind the fridge. The apartment was destroyed. The counter was broken, the window was gone, there was a hole in the bathroom wall. Dominic turned around. He looked wild. His chest was heaving, his shirt hung in tatters, and there was blood on his hands. He looked at Liv with an expression of pure terror, not for himself, but for what she would do now that she saw what he was. "Liv," he started, his voice rough. "I can explain. The LARP group. We take it very—" "Stop!" Liv said. She walked over to him. She stepped over the broken glass. She stopped right in front of him. She looked at the ring still clutched in her hand. Then she looked at his eyes, which were slowly fading from black back to dark brown. "You threw a man out of a window," she said. "He had a parachute?" Dominic tried weakly. "You bent a crowbar." "It was cheap metal." Liv let out a long, shaky breath. She reached out and took his hand, the one with the blood on it. She slapped the platinum ring into his palm. "You're a werewolf," she stated. It wasn't a question. Dominic froze. He looked at the ring, then at her. "Yes." "And you're a king, like a real king, not a nerd king." "Yes." "And Beef isn't your queen?" Dominic actually cracked a smile. "No, Beef is not my queen." Liv nodded. She looked around at her ruined apartment. "You owe me a new kitchen, and a new door, and therapy for my raccoon." Dominic exhaled, the tension leaving his body so fast he almost staggered. He pulled her into him, wrapping his arms around her like he was trying to shield her from the world. "I will buy you a house. I will buy you a bakery. I will buy you a raccoon sanctuary." "Start with the door," Liv mumbled into his chest. An icy wind whipped through the broken window, freezing the tears on her cheeks, but Dominic was a furnace of heat. She pressed closer to him, shielded from the Chicago winter by his massive frame. She smelled the blood, but mostly she smelled him, rain and cedar. She didn't feel afraid. She felt home. "Is Krell dead?" she asked. "He landed on garbage," Dominic said, listening to the sirens approaching below. "He's broken. My pack is downstairs. They will intercept the police and handle the cleanup. By the time the cops look in that alley, there won't be a body to find." "Good," Liv said. She pulled back and looked up at him. "So does this mean I'm, what, the queen?" Dominic brushed a curl of hair out of her face. His thumb traced her cheekbone. "You are my mate, Olivia. You are the only thing that matters." "Okay," Liv smiled, tired but happy. "But I'm keeping my last name, and I'm not eating raw meat." "Deal." Dominic leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't a polite kiss. It was a claiming. It was rough and desperate and full of promises. From the couch, Beef chirped and began eating the stuffing out of the cushions. Chapter 30. 6 months later. The bell above the door chimed. "Welcome to the Alpha's Sweet Tooth," Liv called out from behind the counter. She was covered in flour, wearing an apron that said, "Baking Bad." The customer, a nervous-looking human man, walked in. He looked at the display case full of cupcakes, croissants, and bear claws. Then he looked at the corner of the shop. Sitting in a large armchair by the window was a man who looked entirely too dangerous to be in a pastel-colored bakery. He was wearing a black suit that cost more than the building. He was reading a newspaper, but his dark eyes tracked every movement the customer made. The customer stammered. Is that guy security?" Liv smiled as she boxed up a dozen muffins. "Him? Yeah, he's the bouncer. Very strict. Don't make any sudden moves around the muffins." Dominic lowered the newspaper. He glared at the customer. "Lemon bars are fresh," he rumbled. "Buy 2. "Yes, sir," the customer squeaked. "I'll take 2, and a coffee." The customer paid and practically ran out of the shop. Liv laughed, walking around the counter. She wiped her hands on her apron and leaned against Dominic's chair. "You're scaring the clientele, Dom. Again." "He looked suspicious," Dominic said, reaching out to pull her onto his lap. He was eyeing the scones. "They're scones. They're meant to be eyed." Liv settled into his lap, resting her head on his shoulder. The bakery was warm, smelling of sugar and yeast. In the corner, in a custom-built luxury cat tree, Beef was sleeping, wearing a tiny platinum collar that matched Dominic's signet ring. "Marcus called," Dominic said, running his hand up and down her back. "The council wants to schedule a dinner. They want to formally apologize for the misunderstanding with the raccoon." "Tell them Beef accepts cash or shiny objects," Liv murmured. "And tell them if they bow to me one more time, I'm going to spray them with wintergreen." Dominic chuckled, the sound vibrating in his chest. "I'll pass it along." He kissed the top of her head. He looked out the window at the city he ruled. He had the territory, he had the power, but holding the chaotic, flower-covered human in his arms was the only victory that mattered. "Hey, Dan," Liv whispered. "It's Dominic," he corrected for the 1,000th time, though there was no heat in it. "I know, but you'll always be my favorite security guard." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a bright, hideous, hand-knit yellow scarf. She wrapped it around his neck. "Happy anniversary," she said. Dominic looked at the ugly scarf. It clashed with his suit. It was itchy. He smiled. "It's perfect." He tightened his arms around her, and the Alpha King of Chicago settled in for a long afternoon of guarding his queen and her pastries. The end.